Welcome to Tabletop Gaming Guild. Tabletop Gaming Guild is all about the experiences and memories that playing tabletop games with friends and families can create. Today we're looking at Raw, a classic auction game with a set collection mechanic. Now Raw has been getting a lot of attention lately because of a recent deluxe version release, as well as it being featured on the World Series of Board Gaming as one of the main events. There's also an expansion being developed for Raw. So this has obviously renewed my interest in the game, and I wanted to feature it. Even though I have the older version, the rules have not changed. They have just deluxified the components. To set up Raw, put the Raw token within reach of all players. Put the number 1 voting token in the center of the board. Each player gets a player aid and 10 victory points and 3 voting tokens. And the distribution of the numbers are going to vary based on player count. So you just look in the rule book, see which number combination makes up the various sets of 3, and then you randomize those sets of 3 to different players. So it's easy to figure out because basically you would deal them out highest to lowest, then snake them, and then snake them again. So let's say I got this set of 3. These would be my potential bids for the round. On a turn, you have 2 possible actions. You can either draw a token from the bag and add it to the auction, or you can take the raw token. If you take the raw token, you trigger an auction. An auction goes for 1 round, starting to the left of the person who triggered it. And that person can either select one of their tokens to bid with, or they can pass. Next player can either pass or exceed that bid, in which case that player gets their bidding token back. When it comes to the last person to bid, which is always the person who triggered the auction, if they voluntarily chose to trigger the auction, they must place a bid if nobody else has. Otherwise, they can pass. So in other words, if somebody has chose to trigger the auction, somebody must win that auction. Winning bid token goes into the center of the board, and they take token that was on the board and put it face down in front of them. They also take all of the tiles that were in the auction, whether they're good or bad. Certain tiles need to be resolved right away, but we'll get into that when we go through what the tiles do. But the important thing to note at this point is when you're bidding for an auction, you need to keep in mind you're not only bidding for the tiles that hopefully will get you points throughout the game and at the end game scoring. You're also bidding for the bid token that you can use in the future rounds. If nobody triggers an auction or chooses to win a mandatory auction, the auction track can get filled. If ever this auction track is filled and they choose to draw another action token, all the tiles from the auction are wiped and removed from the game. The round continues until either all players have used all 3 of their bids, or enough of these raw tokens have been drawn to fill up this raw track. The length of this raw track that you use varies based on the number of players. At the end of each round, you would do an intermediate scoring, then clear all tokens from the board and they go out of the game. Game goes for 3 rounds, and then you total up your score. Whoever has the most points wins, tiebreaker being the highest value in bidding tokens at the end of the game. That's how the game is played. Next we'll have to go over scoring and what each tile does. Some tiles score from round to round, others, once they've scored at the end of a round, go away, and some stay until the end of the game and aren't scored until the end of the game. The first token I want to talk about is the raw token. Raw token does not go into the auction, it goes straight onto this raw track. Its starting position is determined by the number of players in this game. Once this raw track is filled, that triggers the end of the round. The other thing that these raw tokens do is they trigger a mandatory auction. As soon as this is drawn, an auction starts with the person to the left of the active player being the first to bid. However, in mandatory auctions, no bid is required, so these can go on with no one winning the bid, and then you just continue on like nothing happened. Once you've pulled enough raw tokens to fill this entire track, the round immediately ends. So if you still have unused auction tokens, you're out of luck. There's also disaster tokens in the auction bag. If you win an auction containing a disaster, you must lose that token and 2 tokens of the matching type. While these are really bad, you may still want to acquire them because there's enough good stuff in the auction to make it worth losing that, or you may not even have the tiles that this is forcing you to lose, so you have no real loss. However, what will often happen if there's a lot of disaster tokens in the auction, people keep going around until that auction is filled and then gets wiped. Next, let's talk about the tokens that actually go into your tableau for scoring. You'll notice that certain tokens have these little scarabs, which means they are retained from round to round. Generally, those are the monuments that go for endgame scoring. Any other tiles, after you score them at the end of a round, they go out of the game. God token is worth 2 points at the end of the round if you still have it. However, instead of taking your normal action to turn, you can spend any number of God tokens to take the equivalent number of tiles from the auction track. The turn immediately ends. You don't get to either draw or invoke Raw during that turn. Gold is worth 3 points at the end of the round. There are 5 types of culture tokens. At the end of the round, if you have none of them, you lose 5 points. However, you get scaling points depending on if you have at least 3 different culture tokens. There are 2 types of river tokens. There is the Nile token that is permanent and remains from round to round. However, they score nothing for you unless you happen to have a flood tile as well. If you have at least 1 flood tile at the end of the round, all your river tiles, including the flood tile itself, score 1 point. However, that flood is discarded at the end of the round, so in order to score those Nile tokens again the next round, you need to make sure you get another flood. Note, if you ever get a flood disaster, the flood tokens are lost first before any Nile tokens. Pharaoh tokens also remain from round to round. At the end of each round, the person with the most scores 5 points, whereas the person with the least loses 2 points. The final tokens are the monument tokens. These are kept from round to round and only score at the end of the game. There are 8 different monument tokens. You get points for having many different ones. You also get points for having sets of the same. You can get up to 15 points for having 8 different ones, or up to 15 points for having 5 identical ones. However, if you're going for identical, you need at least 3 identical ones to score any points for matching. So that's all the tiles in the game. The only other scoring element is at the end of the game, everyone will flip all their face down bid tokens, total the value on all their bid tokens. The highest number gets 5 extra points. The lowest number loses 5 points. That's all you need to know to play Raw. Thank you again for watching. Please join us again on YouTube, Twitch, Instagram, and other social medias. And please don't forget to like and subscribe.